I
Okay.
have to acknowledge it. Simon, we have done many books. The foundation has done dozens of books over the last several decades, but we've never had Betty Davis before on a cover. How did that happen?
I don't know. It's one of those, she was one of those stars who slipped through the cracks. But I mean, we were looking for an image that was, showed innocence and glamour at the same time. And this photo, was one on the shortlist. And in the end, it's the one that stood out. And I like it because, we have this more fixed view of Bette Davis with this kind of quite severe face. But what I like about this particularly is that it shows this young, very pretty Bette Davis at the start of her career. And so I
She's
think,
almost not recognizable unless you're a real fan. So that makes it perhaps more intriguing.
yes, one hopes that, I mean, it's an image that will draw you in to have a look and see who it is, and then look at other people in the book, the other many stars.
It's innocent, but it does have a decidedly gently sultry quality.
Yes, that's true. It's, I
And
mean,
and you know, what does the song say about the Betty Davis eyes?
it's true.
You know, we certainly are seeing Betty Davis eyes there.
That's right. In fact, when that campaign came out, we provided the photo that they used on all the on the single covers. Wasn't this
Perfect.
one? It was another one of her quite young actually.
And
Um,
then we open the book, and what do we find inside?
um, what do we find inside?
Well, who are the stars included, and why
Oh,
did we choose the ones we chose? And
well, I think that
tell us
we
about the genesis of the book.
yes. Well, I mean the genesis was that our archive of prints um, had been sold a few years before, and when we were asked to do this book, what we did have was the original 10 by 8 negatives, and so we worked from those, and in doing so, we were able to find images that hadn't been widely seen before. Um, and why did we choose the stars that are in it? I think probably it came down to our personal favorites, didn't it?
There
And
you go.
there's certain ones that have to be in the book, obviously, Garbo, Dietrich, Gable, etc. And then there are others that that we just we particularly liked.
Well, I think we looked at something like 10,000 negatives. Am I exaggerating saying that? But
Uh,
10,000 negatives to make this choice.
Probably right. Yep.
And I think one of the angles that we were using was to find images that the foundation had not reproduced before, and that we hadn't seen, in the Hollywood world.
Yeah,
That
I think
was,
that's true of most of them. I mean, there were one or two.
oh, sure, yeah, yeah, but the
But
predominant,
in the main, absolutely, we were trying to bring images out, even from sessions that were known. We were, producing fresh images from that session,
yeah.
so they were new in that sense. I mean, I think what's interesting going beyond that is obviously the book shows, is the end result. The photos are the end result of a process um, that
A
they had,
long, deliberate process.
long deliberate process where the studios, with the help of the photographers and obviously the press department, molded. They had to first of all find an image and then mold it and then sustain it, and that's really what these photos are about. And
We start in the silent era with the great giants of that period, and carry through the talkies to the end of the studio system, with really the last stars in the 50s who had contracts before that whole system crumbled.
yeah, yeah, and
I think, isn't Sidney Poitier our last image?
it is, yeah. And I mean, he and Joan Collins are about the only ones, oh, and Sophie Loren, are about the only ones still alive.
Who actually had significant careers in the 50s.
Yeah, exactly.
Operating under that before independent production became, well, not only dominant, but finally the only way films were made anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
What are some of your favorites, Simon?
Some of my favorites. Well, funny enough, I'm not necessarily always the big stars. I love there's an Anime Wong I love with her with a kind of wonderful headdress and in From, actually I don't even know what film it's from, but it was actually just a studio portrait. But that Anime Wong photo for me is just fantastic. One of my other favorites, Carol Lombard. She's a particular favorite of mine, and there's just a portrait I've always loved of her, where she's staring straight at the camera and just
I find it interesting with Anime Wong that she is, I believe, more famous today than she ever was when she was working.
Yeah.
And that, as you said, when we were going through the negatives, we were looking for great, great images, and hers were among the best.
Yeah.
Really not only a fabulous face, but somebody compelling. And I think it's wonderful to be able to show her in the 21st century in a way that she was hardly seen, in the 20s and 30s.
Yeah. I mean, the problem with us is we've done so many books and exhibitions that we don't forget, because of course once we see them, we're drawn straight back to them, which are the photos of Crawford or Dietrich, or I mean, we've lived with them over the years, but of course, when you do come back to those, they are outstanding. And but it's nice we've found some fresh ones. I love the one of Crawford looking at herself, a reflection of herself.
Yeah. Well, it's I don't know. Crawford was probably the greatest portrait subject who ever came out of Hollywood, and perhaps in any photographic medium. She had such command of the camera, and she worked with particularly George Hurrell, and it's one of the great collaborations between photographer and subject.
Yes, I think it's important. That's a very good point to make, because those collaborations, like Clarence Bull with Garbo and Dietrich, with
Richie
and Walling,
yeah.
and Don English. Those were really important, and that's the thing that people don't realize. I mean, these people were working month in, month out, with these photographers. They knew them well and trusted them. And of course, in those days, the studios would never done anything to let a bad image go out of their star, because they
never
to protect them. So they could totally trust the photographer in the studio to only send out the best.
Well, and not only trust the photographer, but if you go back to a photographer like Ruth Harriet Louise, she was critical to the invention of these star faces.
Absolutely.
Garbo, Crawford, and others. It was worked out in the portrait studio.
Absolutely.
And I think the image we have of Crawford today, everybody sees Mildred Pierce and Grand Hotel, but I think it's Hurrell's portraits that are really seared into our minds.
It's true. And it's like with Dietrich, I mean, those images by Ritchie and by Walling and Don English,
they're so glamorous.
Shanghai Express era, they epitomize everything we think of as Hollywood glamour.
That's right.
Also, mustn't forget the men.
Mustn't forget the men.
Clark
with some pretty great faces.
Ramon Navarro.
Yeah. Well, Gable, whether you like it, he was such a gigantic star. The thing with the men, of course, is they didn't like to be photographed. The women would want to spend all day, and the men would come in for 45 minutes. Cooper in particular, after 10 shots were taken, you can look at these portrait sessions with Garbo, and each one has 80 or 90 shots. There's no such thing as a Cooper or Gable portrait session
Well,
those kinds of numbers
Spencer Tracy had to be dragged in.
dragged in.
But they used to have to get Catherine Hepburn to try and
To drag him in.
and push him in, because he absolutely, and you can tell actually his portraits by and large are very solid and very boring, because all he gave them was like, I'm here, you got 5 minutes, do it.
Well, those portrait studios in the 20s, 30s, and 40s were really the domain of the women. So I think, when a Gable or a Cooper went in, it they knew they were in ladies' territory.
Yeah, they did. But I mean, but there are some. I'm glad to say there are some very good portraits of the men in this.
Oh yeah, no, plenty. I mean, somebody like Gregory Peck, Burt Lancaster, they were these spectacular, faces in the 40s. I mean, even Bogart, he might not have been the best looking guy in the world, but he certainly took a great portrait.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Strength of character is part of what makes a fabulous face.
And we've also got, we've got some of the great comics in there.
Yeah.
That we've got, some of the black actors in there. I mean, Hollywood wasn't known for giving much, chance for black actors to feature, because that was the times,
They were always in subordinate roles.
But we've made sure that we've included them, and I think there's something for everyone in this book.
That's very well said. There's something for everyone in this. It's an image-driven book. What do we have? About 200?
Yeah, 200, just over actually.
Yeah, bit over.
Something.
The great Louise Brody did the design.
Yeah.
And she could not have served us better.
And there's a terrific essay by you about the stars and the star system.
Well, what makes a fabulous face, and that was an interesting topic to ponder. What makes a fabulous face?
Yeah, it's true.
And the main thing that makes a fabulous face in the end is the camera.
Well, yeah, it's right. But it is true also. Well, it is the face in the end. As I said in my own piece, you very often these stars were behind the same backdrop, sometimes the same props. They were given the same chances as people who became stars. They were all on an equal level, but then some of them, the camera just picked up what it was that made them something very special. And I think that's what we're seeing in this book, the ones that survived the process and who the camera loved. And,
Crawford arrives in Hollywood when she's 19. She's a little overweight. She's not that attractive. She can't act. She can't dance, and had a 90-day contract. And 50 years later, she was still the biggest star in the world. And that was the camera. Something happened.
As we've seen, and as you've said, she was very savvy about, she saw the value of being in the publicity photos. I think
that's it.
More negatives of Crawford pushing every kind of, want some for Halloween, Joan put her hand up. Christmas, Joan put her hand up. Yeah. Summertime, Joan put her hand up. I mean, she worked it, and it was brilliant. I mean, that energy.
And she learned how to be a portrait subject.
Yeah.
And then when she became a star, she figured out how to become beautiful.
Yeah.
And, that is the magic of Hollywood.
Yeah. And of course, this process, having a portrait taken was all part of that. And
critical.
And so we end up with the fabulous faces we have. And
in fact, as we've learned, you had to succeed in the portrait gallery before you ever had a chance in front of the camera.
That's true.
You never got a screen test until you had a good portrait. Yeah, good portrait gave you a screen test, and then you had to have a good screen test. And
it is true. I mean, when I look at pictures of people who didn't make it, they're literally, your eye just passes straight by them. They're part of the furniture. But when you come to, a picture like our cover, Bette Davis, you stop. you know,
Yeah.
and you want to know who that person is, and you want to know more about them, and that's
And we still watch her films that she made in the 50s, 60s, 70s, she had it. And she might not have made the great classics anymore, but she's remained a compelling screen presence.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, good. So basically, you know, the book will be out there in July, and
July.
go and get it.
Well, I think we've given ACC more than enough.
Yeah, I don't know.
So
How do I stop it? Okay. Oh no, no, sorry. No, cancel. I'm doing the wrong thing here. How do I stop it? Oh, pause, stop recording. Okay. I'll pause it for a second.